It's time to build momentum, to interrupt and end race-based hatred and violence.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. I'm so glad that you have joined in for this episode of Momentum. Momentum is a limited time series that is focused on reminding us that if we want to be people who are committed to interrupting and ending race-based hatred and violence, then we need reminders, we need things to inspire us, we need information, we need ideas, we need each other. And when we have all of those things, or we tap into all of those options, we get the opportunity to build momentum together. So on Monday evenings at 8 p.m., 15-ish minutes, sometimes less, sometimes a little more, just to get a little time to stop and recommit. So Momentum is connected to the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group, where we ask the question every day, what is mine to do to interrupt or end race-based hatred and violence? And it is focused on the individual interactions that we have with people we come into contact with every day. So that's a little different than some other sites or groups where the focus is what group can you join, what community organization can you support, and some of our individual actions can and should be that. But you'll see less about responding to political situations and more focus on how do we engage with people on a personal level or an individual or small group level, the people we come into contact with at work, at school, in our community, in the grocery store, every day. So today, the question is, while everybody is so focused on back to school for their children, their grandchildren, their neighborhood kids, and maybe even themselves, there's a lot of attention on it's time for school to begin again. And so for momentum, I'm going to encourage you to use this time, this week, next week, in the next week or two, and find a class, a webinar, a workshop. Find a class or course that you want to take that will help you communicate when there's cross-cultural conflict, that will educate you about a race or ethnic group that you don't know much about. Find a class that will give you the skill you need to have confidence when you need to interrupt race-based hatred and violence. So it could be education, it could be communication, it could be history. There's a lot to choose from. And I thought about recommending like 4 or 5 specific courses. But as I was preparing for tonight, I was like, no, actually, I think it's really good for you to find a course or workshop or group experience that will be really meaningful to you based on where you work or what school you go to or teach at or what's going on in your local community. because there's some people. I was talking with a colleague about 3 weeks ago, and they live in a community where there is a large Filipino community population. And they just made a comment about how, even though they do a lot of work related to diversity and inclusion and communication, that they realized, because they were doing some work at a hospital in their local community, and they realized they didn't really know much about the cultural norms of people who identify as Filipino. And that came up because the hospital that they were doing some work with had a very large contingent of nurses who had come to the US to work in healthcare from the Philippines. And there were some cultural clashes that were happening at the hospital, and my colleague realized that they didn't know really much about that particular group. So, if you live in a community where there is an ethnic identity group that is a large part of the population and you don't know much about it, then maybe that's the kind of class that you should look for. Or maybe you work in corporate America, and you realize there are a number of employees in the different departments, and you don't know much about their background and how that shows up in communication and leadership. And maybe you want to learn more about that. Or maybe you want to simply find a book and read that with a book discussion group, not just go read a book on your own. The purpose of this that I'm encouraging you to do now is to do it with a group of people, to learn together, to learn yourself, but also to learn together. And so, taking a class, or it may be taking a communication class, but you take it at a place where you know that there are going to be people from different ethnic groups or different racial identity groups. So that's the focus for today with Let's Build Momentum. It's time to go back to school. Everybody's getting their backpacks and their school supplies. And so look for and sign up for a class. Now, in addition to learning more about a specific culture or a specific racial or ethnic identity group, there are a couple of other reasons that I'm encouraging you to do this. So, when we meet new people who are interested in or committed to the same things that we are, then that expands our network. So let's say you sign up for a class and it's only a one session workshop, like a 3 hour or 4 hour workshop. You're going to meet some people who they signed up for the workshop and they have interest in the same thing, right? That you would not have met them any other way. And so, one of the obvious advantages of taking a class or signing up for a course is the learning, because lifelong learning on this topic is critical. But the second reason is that you are likely to meet one or two people who then you can reach out to, and number three, build relationships with. Because so often when we are doing this work or committed to change, it's easy to feel like we're the only one, or that we're all alone, or that, we're vulnerable in exposing ourselves to criticism and backlash, and we have to like stand there and do it all our own. But you don't. And so Learning, yes. Two, you meet new people who you might probably or might not have met otherwise. And three, that gives you the potential to build some new relationships with people you can talk with about this commitment, and people you can get ideas from. And then, of course, learning is, when I think of learning, I think about really what did I learn in my head. But I also want to remind you that when you take a class, you get to practice some new things. And so you develop a new skill, or you develop depth and breadth in a skill you already have. So we want to build momentum. And in this case, it's time, this is a good time of year to look for a workshop, look for a class, look for a course. And I want to encourage you to do that. You can also join us over at the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group. And uh, during the last week of August, I'll be posting some links. So if you haven't found a course or class to take by then I'll be posting some ideas there during the last week of August of things that I know are coming up in September or October. And one final comment, I do want to encourage you to look for a class in your local community, a class or a workshop. But I think it's also great to look online and to do a class virtually, because if you're like me, it's very helpful to have a network, whether it's local or all around the country or the world, because sometimes things come up and you need to have a variety of people you can bounce your ideas off of, or you can get their suggestions about how you might respond to a situation. So, local is great, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with also going um, virtual in order to learn, meet new people, build relationships, and strengthen your skills. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm so glad you joined me for this episode of Let's Build Momentum. And I hope to see you again next Monday night at 8 p.m. Central Time, right here.